Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Her Unraveled Life, my new podcast. I am Amy Wadlington. I'm a certified holistic life and health coach. I'm a mom, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm an author. And this is Her Unraveled Life. The purpose of this podcast is really to provide a space where faith and healing and life stories all intertwine. It's a journey into holistic health, Holy Spirit-led Christian faith, overcoming, breaking through, and real life stories. Hopefully a little bit of humor and a lot of just struggles that maybe I am going through that you can relate to. Hopefully at some point I'll have some guests on here and we can talk about how they have overcome, what they're doing to get through this crazy life that we are living. So I started this podcast really because I felt like God called me to it. It's just one of those times where I wasn't really hearing what he wanted. And so I just stopped doing everything that I was doing and really spent some time with him. And I felt like he was calling me to start a podcast. And I felt completely unqualified and all of the things that come with whatever happens when God calls us to something new. Yet here I am doing the best that I can to obey what he has put on my heart. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, we're going to go through who I am, a little bit of my history, and we'll talk a little bit about the podcast itself, who I serve, who this is for. And if you are here listening, I am just really thankful and glad that you're here. So first and foremost, I am a Christian, a daughter of the one true King Jesus, and I want everyone to know the same love and the same freedoms that I have experienced through him. I have been called also as a prophet to the nations. I operate in the prophetic. My life is often a prophecy. One example is that 2024 is said to be the year of the open door, and in my home we have had problems with every single door in our house. There was a point where we had to stop using our front door because it stopped working. And so we started using the garage door, and then the garage door broke and we had to start going around to the back door. And then we had a deep freeze and we were having problems opening the back door. So yes, that was quite the journey, but I was able to get a couple of professionals out here and got everything fixed and everything's working. And then I started praying about it and I thought, it's just too much of a coincidence for every single door in our home to not be working. So what's going on here, God? And that is kind of how my life works, is that when things start just catching my attention like that, I just tune in to what he's saying through it. And just to share the highlights of that one is the front door. What happened is the front door hardware all had to be completely replaced. I thought our house was shifting, so thank goodness that wasn't the problem. I'm sure it's shifting slightly, but nothing that's causing the door to not be able to open. So we replaced the hardware on that. And then our garage door was out of alignment, and so it wasn't opening or closing correctly. And so I had a garage door repairman come out, and he was able to get it to where it was in alignment and it started working. And when I started praying about it, God was showing me about how if we want to have open doors in our life, then we have to be in alignment with him, right? We have to be in alignment with his will. And then if we want to have open doors, we also have to allow him to transform us through the renewing of our minds. We have to take every thought captive. And so that would be replacing the hardware on that front door. And then on the back door, there wasn't anything wrong with the actual door. We just had really cold temperatures and snow. And so the ice and the door was making it frozen. And the only way to get that door open, we could get a butter knife and kind of scoop the snow out and make sure that there wasn't any snow in there. But really the only thing that we could do was to wait on the right conditions. The sun had to come out and the temperature had to come up. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We're in alignment with God and his will. We have been transformed by the renewing of our minds. We've learned how to take every thought captive, yet the door is still not opening. And that might be because we just have to wait on the Lord. And it's a season of waiting. And I think that that's where so many people are right now, is in this season of waiting for the sun to come out, waiting for the perfect circumstances. The sun had to come out, the temperature had to rise, and then our door started working again. And now it's been warm, back door's working, our garage door is back into alignment, our front door, the hardware has been changed, and we've got new keys for everybody. And so we are prophetically ready for our open doors in this family. So that is a little bit about how prophecy works in my life. If you're prophetic, you may notice that you also live through prophecies before they actually happen. So it's exciting. Maybe this podcast is the beginning of my open door. We'll see. And so also, I'm a mom to two amazing daughters, and they are hilarious and they're courageous and they amaze me and inspire me every single day. I am so blessed to be their mother, and I just love them so much. They are amazing kids and they're their own people. They are adults now. The youngest one is going to be 18 in April, and so she's close. And then the oldest one is 22, and it's just so cool. I always say this is my favorite stage of parenting, and it is, but every stage has been my favorite stage of parenting. I always said growing up, people would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up. My answer was always, I want to be a mom. And here I am living the dream, and I absolutely adore it. It is wonderful. The three of us live in Castle Rock, Colorado. I have been in Colorado most of my life. I was born and raised for the first 9 years of my life in Albuquerque, New Mexico, moved to Colorado. We lived in Littleton and went to school in Littleton, and then moved to Castle Rock about 5 years ago, and we absolutely love it. It's amazing. I homeschool my daughters here. They went through public school through about 7th, 8th grade. Both of them. One went through 7th, one went through 8th, and then started homeschooling through high school. And it's just been such a fun adventure to live here in Castle Rock and to be a homeschooling family. And I'm also, if you haven't caught it yet, I'm a single mom as well. And I am an overcomer. I don't know if it's that I'm really competitive or that I'm really stubborn or that it's my relationship with God. Probably all of the above, but I really am an overcomer. There has been a lot of trash thrown my way, like probably everybody who's listening to this, that there's just, life is hard. There are a lot of things that have been thrown my way, and I have just been stubborn enough to not give up and to just keep going and to overcome, to break through. And that's part of what this podcast is for, is to share some of those stories with you. I can't wait to dig into the weeds on some of it. A lot of it, I don't even know yet what we'll be sharing, but I know kind of the overhead of what we'll be talking about. And that is a little bit about what we'll be talking about, is overcoming and breaking through and how we get unstuck, because there's so many people who are stuck right now, and that is not the life that God created us to live. And so it's time to move on. I got into holistic life and health coaching because of my own health history, actually. I was diagnosed with Graves' disease about 22 years ago, and it's kind of a pivotal moment in my life. It was pre having a really deep relationship with Jesus, and the first time that I ever took responsibility for my own self. And I was always a very compliant person. I always followed the rules. Anything that I might get hurt doing, I wouldn't do. If a grown-up or somebody in authority told me I had to do something, I would do it. And 22 years ago, when I was diagnosed with Graves', my doctor told me that he wanted to kill off my thyroid with radioactive iodine. And I said no. And that was the first time in my life that I had ever said no to an authority figure. And he tried to talk me into it, and still knew deep down that it was not the right thing for me. They said that it was my thyroid that was causing all of the problems. And I believed that it was the environment that I was living in, because I was in a very very stressful season in my life, and a lot of things were going on at home that I believed were actually causing the problems with my body. And this was long before I had any idea that trauma and stress did have such an impact on the body. But I knew that if I could change the environment that I was living in, that I would start to heal. And that's exactly what happened. That was 22 years ago, 2008. I did go through a divorce, and then I started seeking alternatives to traditional medical advice, because every time I would go to a doctor and I would tell them about how I was feeling, they would only look at the blood results and they would tell me how I was feeling, but it was the opposite of what I was actually feeling. I had hair loss, and no doctor ever diagnosed me with, but I had symptoms of IBS, which, if you're ever diagnosed with IBS, it basically means we don't know what's wrong with you. But I was going to the bathroom frequently and nothing was solid. We'll just put it that way. And I had major stomach pains, rapid heart rate, and it was often dismissed when I would go to the doctor as depression or anxiety. And maybe it did align with some of the things that were going on in my life, that I did have those things, but I didn't feel like that was it either. And so I really just tried to do things on my own. And I was able to do a lot of things on my own, but it took a long time and it took a lot of guesswork and God strategically putting the right people in my life. And He was so faithful in doing that. And in about 2014, I was talking to a friend of mine about the emotional chaos that was going on in our lives. There was so much because of the past trauma that had impacted myself and my children, that we were just living this chaotic, crazy life. We weren't sleeping well. We couldn't fall asleep. We couldn't wake up in the mornings. We weren't eating well. And stress was at its all-time high. And my friend suggested that I try using essential oils. And I did. And I saw an instant change in mood. And then I started noticing that we were sleeping better. And then I started removing some of the toxic chemicals that we had in our house, like cleaning products and laundry detergent and beauty products and shampoos and lotions and all of these things that we have in our homes that we don't think would impact us emotionally or as negatively impact us physically as well. But I started seeing a change in behavior. We were sleeping better. Our emotions were more grounded and things just started turning better. And that was about the same time that I started really going to church on a regular basis as well. And so I was doing things in pockets, and I didn't realize that it was this whole puzzle being put together piece by piece. So I was going to church, I was building a community within my church, and online I had this amazing community of friends. I was a photographer at the time, and that's where I met my friend her name is Erin Rogers, and she is the person who introduced me to essential oils. And then things started really turning around for us, and later I started changing the way that I was eating, but I still wasn't really feeling great. So I found a doctor that actually listened to me and able to do some testing. And he actually decided to test me for celiac, which I had no idea that I had symptoms of celiac. I had never heard of celiac. This was a couple years before gluten-free stuff exploded. And I was blessed by the explosion, because I was actually able to eat more foods than I thought I was going to be able to. But I was later diagnosed with celiac and then Hashimoto's as well. A lot of people have Hashimoto's or Graves. I happen to have both. And I also was later diagnosed with Epstein-Barr virus. And all of those things are linked to chronic stress and trauma and chronic inflammation. And so that is when I really just started diving into natural health. I started educating other people on natural health, and I was inspired by all of the positive changes from the lifestyle adjustments that I was making, and just started transitioning obviously into a gluten-free diet. I had the environmental toxins out of my home, and things were really starting to look up. Things were getting better financially as well. And then 2020 hit. And we all know what happened in 2020. But I had been in a 15-year career in marketing at that time, and I lost my job because I worked with small and medium sized businesses in America with their marketing, the digital marketing. I did their websites and Google ads and SEO, SEM, stuff like that. And when every business in the country closes down, there's really no need for them to market, right? And so I was laid off from my job, and that is when I really dug in to Bible studies. I was doing 2 or 3 Bible studies a day during 2020. I was reading the Bible every single day. I was studying the Bible prior to that with my pastor on a weekly basis, and it was just all starting to come together. And I did a 21-day prayer and fast, and I just asked God to guide me and assist me on what was next, because I was at the end of a chapter of my life. And that is when He led me to become a certified holistic life and health coach to help others find similar freedoms that I had found. And things were going great. Things were actually going really good. And I went back to school in 2020. I was certified in 2021. I started my business. And then in 2021, in the fall, I actually got COVID. And COVID was not fun to have, but I was only sick with COVID for about a week and a half or 2 weeks. And then it caused a flare. My Epstein-Barr virus reactivated, and then my Hashimoto's and Graves' disease antibodies skyrocketed. And I had been living medication free for about 10 years because my thyroid was in remission and everything was going really well until I got COVID. And that caused this crazy flare in my body. And that really grounded me and made me take a look at what I was doing with a fine tooth comb, because I had to really focus on my diet, my lifestyle, and any toxins that were in my life, and had to integrate the holistic mindset that I was teaching as a holistic life and health coach, and had to embrace it fully. I was living in so much pain because of the flare. My entire body was inflamed. My sciatica was inflamed, so I could hardly sit or stand. And then I pulled a tendon in my knee and I could hardly walk upstairs. It just got really difficult to live. And I was in that flare for about a year and a half. And during that time, it helped me to learn to embrace the spiritual aspect of the healing path. And so I had always had the life and health lifestyle stuff and diet and everything on one side of the one burner, and then my spiritual life on another burner. But when I got the COVID and I got so sick and I had this flare, I realized that it all had to come together, that there was inner healing that needed to happen. And I had to really surrender. I came to the end of myself and I had to completely surrender and ask God, what was it that He wanted me to do? What was it that I had to do? What was it that I was eating that was causing inflammation? What types of activities was I doing that was harming me? And that is when God stepped in, and He's so faithful, isn't He? He's so faithful, and He just guided me every step of the way. And within just a couple of weeks of embracing the holistic, real holistic, and including Jesus in my healing path and going through some deliverance and really working on inner healing, changing the way that I was eating and managing my stress. That was a huge one because I would be triggered, and don't get me wrong when I say that I'm not trying to put blame on my daughter at all, but I would be triggered by some of the things that she was doing because she was a teenager, being a normal teenager, and it was causing this inner turmoil within me. And finally I went to God and I was like, what is wrong? What is happening here? Am I not a good parent? What is happening? And He showed me that it was me, that I had so much inner healing still to do to overcome some of the past trauma that I had gone through, and that it definitely was not my daughter. She was just being a normal teenager, but I was triggered by some of the things that she was doing, by her behavior. And it actually was amazing because it helped our relationship so much, because when I was able to tell her that my reaction to her actions was not her that was causing that it was me, it mended so much pain and hurt that I didn't even realize was there. And so that is a little bit of my backstory. And then in 2021, right before all of this started, and I did the 21 days of prayer and fasting in 2020, God told me in the next year that I would actually use that time that I had been doing the praying and fasting and to take it and write a book about it. And so that is where my book, Into the Deep 21 Days of Prayer and Fasting, Contending for the Promise and Stepping into God's Call. And that was the beginning of my book. And that book has been published since December of 2023, and it's on Amazon. And it's just a little piece of my heart of what I went through when I surrendered and gave everything to God when I lost my job and went through the process of stepping into the next season of my life. And so that's my prayer with that book, is that it helps other women do the same thing. And so that brings me to who I am here to help. And I really believe that I am called to serve women who also struggle with their health. Maybe they also have stress-related health issues, possibly past trauma. I have found that autoimmunity is very commonly has a root cause of past trauma. Most of the women that I have worked with have autoimmunity, also have past trauma, or have really high stress. And when 2020 was going on and the world was shut down, God showed me how that was a global traumatic event. With my podcast name, it's Her Unraveled Life. It was a new raveling of putting things in knots for us. And so that's what happens with trauma and with stress and with life and with health and all of the craziness, is that we get up in these knots and then we believe lies of the enemy and we come into agreement with the enemy, and all of these happen and we get entangled in that. And part of what I want to do is help women to untangle all of that. And that's the unraveled part of Her Unraveled Life. And that's where the name of the podcast came from. And so I help women who are just entangled in the mess of life, whether they're having health issues or just life craziness, whatever it is. I am here to help women who are fatigued and stuck and frustrated, but they are done with all of that and they're ready to step into who God called them to be and live the vibrant and energetic life that God created them for. And my prayer and hope is to help them address all of the issues that they've been facing with their physical, their mental, and their spiritual health, looking at the big picture and taking the steps that they can take to get more energy, start feeling good again, and looking at the tiny details, because God is a God of details. And sometimes I might share stories from my past and God will highlight those to me as a pivotal moment in my walk with Him, or I'll share what's on my heart and what God is doing in my life in that moment. And together we'll just unravel the intricacies of life that ultimately have kept us from having that intimate relationship with our Heavenly Father, because that's really the ultimate goal of our enemy, Satan, is that he tries to come between us and God so that we don't look to God for comfort, so that we go to food for comfort, or we go to scrolling on social media or whatever it is. He came here to kill, steal, and destroy, but Jesus came so that we would have life and live it abundantly. That's from John 10:10. And that's really what I am here to help women do, is to step into that abundant life that Jesus fully intends for us to live. And so as a coach, I offer free classes in my community, and you can find it on Facebook. It's Her Unraveled Life, and you can find it there. And I'll put a link in the show notes as well. And I also do one-on-one coaching and group coaching. I also have a course that's an online course that's part of my group coaching program. And so you learn on a weekly basis, you go through the online course. It's a six-phase build method. And with that method, it helps you to go through everything that is like the basics of nutrition and spiritual warfare and all of these amazing things that we'll get more into in future episodes as well. And I just really want to highlight the importance of holistic health, spiritual growth, and understanding life's entanglements. And so that's part of what this podcast is about. That's what my coaching is all about. And I really feel like God has us in a season now where it's time. He is calling his people. There are dry bones and he is breathing life into them, and they are getting up and they are starting to dance. And I just feel like that is where we're at. It is time for us to get up as an army of Christ, and it's time to dance. And whatever it is that he is calling you to, something that he talked to me a lot about recently with this podcast actually was that delayed obedience is disobedience. And so if he's calling you to something and you're not feeling like you're ready for it, and you're delaying obeying him, you're disobeying him. That really convicted me. But starting this podcast, I came up with all of the same excuses that Moses did. It actually, when he highlighted that to me, I just had to laugh because we kind of tease Moses for being full of excuses when God called him to free the Israelites in Exodus 3 and 4. But Moses came up with the excuse that I'm not good enough. I don't know what to talk about. Or he said, I don't have all of the answers. People won't listen to me. I don't speak well. I'm not qualified. And I said all of those things when I was called to this podcast. And so as I delayed starting this podcast, I was in disobedience. But God says, I will be with you. He said that to Moses, and it's a promise to you and I as well. So whatever he's calling you to do, I encourage you to do it, even if you're afraid and you don't feel confident, because you can't have courage without having fear. So I just want to encourage you today to subscribe and follow Her Unraveled Life on your preferred podcast platform. I should be on Apple and Spotify and hopefully other ones. Those are the only two that I know of for sure. Right now, since I'm still new, but I would love for you to leave a review to help more women find this podcast. And I just want to remind you that your feedback is invaluable and that I want to build a community of like-minded individuals. And I want to hear from you. I want to know what you need, because I will create my content around helping you so that you can step into your call and no longer live in delayed obedience or disobedience. I have my free Facebook group, Her Unraveled Life, that I had mentioned, and I would love to hear from you in that group or in the comments of the podcast. The more that you share your struggles with me, the more I can direct my content towards helping you. So I just want to thank you so much for joining this first episode. And I want you to join me on the next episode, where I will be sharing some simple steps that you can take to start feeling better, get more energy, and not spend a whole lot of money on it. I don't want you out there spending a whole bunch of money on supplements and gym memberships when you can take these really simple steps to start feeling better right away. Until next time, friend, thanks so much for being here.